In April 2013, I was a building and zoning inspector in Mon County, West Virginia. I worked in an office in Morgantown where I handled zoning permits and annual building inspections. It's not the most exciting job, but in my profession, a good day is when nothing happens. Fighting wear and tear is constant. I had a sign hanging on my desk to remember it by. It simply said, "Everything breaks." There was a cherub in the corner. I remember one morning I got a call early. There had been some kind of geological event, and all the inspectors had to leave their posts. An urgent inspection of the buildings in the Greenbrier Valley area was needed. We had to coordinate with a command center in Greene County. That morning, everything seemed to be upside down. The local news was talking about an escaped murderer, and we were getting calls about a lake that had dried up. The local hospital urgently needed blood donations, but they didn't say why. In short, something was happening, and none of us liked it. But we followed instructions. They assigned a full inspection at a farm near the epicenter, Oak Valley Grain Farm. They gave me a file with information about the owner, employees, tax records, zoning permits, all that. But they practically kicked me out to the street before I could review it. I had barely finished half of my coffee when I was already in the parking lot with a serious-faced man impatiently tapping the ground with his foot, waiting for me to get going, given the rush they gave us. It seemed like something serious had happened. However, they told us the damage was minimal, if any even so. I had to remind myself of the saying, "Everything breaks." That includes the old barley farms already on the road. I stopped at a rest area to review the file, mostly to get an idea of the place and what I should search. Then for the Oak Valley Grain Farm, an area of 75 acres, established in 1882. It was used for barley and to store wood, since most of the land was covered with oaks. After a few years, the company hired an off-site cooper and began producing its own barley malt to make whiskey. The original malt house and barrel warehouse were still in use. The only problem I noticed was the historic buildings. Oak Valley had several buildings and underground cellars from the Prohibition era, some still in use. Everything was legal and more of an oddity than anything. But those areas had not been properly inspected in years. The owner was reluctant to let inspectors in, and Mon County did not see the need to bother him for something that was at most a curiosity. There were about a dozen employees, not counting temporary labor, the outside cooperative shop, and the farm event planners. I arrived around 10 a.m. Even from the parking lot, I could see rolling hills of germinating barley. Red birds were circling. Some migratory species had returned to rest. There was a low, steady hum in the air, both of the machinery, as of the insects that were beginning to come out. With the spring, the air smelled of manure, wet from the rain and fertile soil. Elsa greeted me. One of the workers, a quiet middle-aged woman with a constant gesture of squinting, as if the sun always bothered her. I contained the impulse to ask her if she had had her eyes checked lately, and I limited myself to shaking her hand. "Welcome to Haw Valley," smiled Lace. "He will be out in a minute, is the owner?" I asked him. "Sir, eh?" "Kettleman. Anders Kettleman." "Yes, but he is not usually around here." Elsie sighed. "Lace is the de facto boss. She handles the daily operations. Anders is more of a not involved, much since he had sciatica." "I am sorry to hear that." I nodded. "Then let's see the boss." Elle showed me the office and the silos. I regretted not having worn more suitable shoes, but most of my inspections were in municipal buildings. This was out of my comfort zone, and my feet would suffer the water, with manure seeped into my socks. I met the kettleman outside the shop. She was busy trying to find someone to finish the repairs on her second combine. Leigh was in her early 30s, but was already starting to go gray. She raised a finger as we approached. She ended her call and looked at me suspiciously. I had met people like Lazy before, but there was something about her that made me uncomfortable. There was something different. "What is it about?" she asked. Crossing her arms, a routine inspection, I told her, because of the geological event in the area. "We haven't had any geological events," she said, shrugging her shoulders, "so we don't need it. It's a big property," I replied. "I'm sure you haven't checked everything. I can help you with that." And then I'm leaving. I thank her, but it's not necessary. I looked at Elsa, who kept. Aside from the conversation, I squeezed my file and regained eye contact. "Miss Kettleman, could you tell me? What is wrong with the harvester?" "I don't know exactly," she said. "That's why I'm trying to contact someone who knows." "Then do you mind if I check the garage, or better yet, the harvester?" "The harvester is not a building," she replied. "It makes no sense for an inspector to check it." "Let's start with the garage." So as she walked away with the cell phone in her hand, Els stayed with me and guided me through the property. It turns out that Elsie was in charge of driving the second harvester, but since it was out of service, she didn't have much to do. She could only access some buildings, but it was enough to start first. We checked the garage. Although Lace had said that there was no geological event, there were clear signs that something had happened. Several objects had fallen from the walls, and the concrete floor had cracks, like spider webs. Nothing serious, but I wrote it down. It was impossible that Lies had not noticed it. I took photos, made some notes, and we went to check out the warehouses for the next few hours. He did walk me around the grounds. Although most of the buildings were out of reach and Lace was nowhere to be seen, I was able to check outside. I didn't see anything obviously dangerous, but it was obvious that the area had been disturbed. The ground had shifted downhill from the sheds, and whole rows of barley were tilted. As we waited so near the offices, Elsie and I walked along the edge of the grounds. There were many oaks historically used for barrel making, and old paths that cut through the undergrowth. We passed near an arbor when I saw an old well at first glance. It didn't seem out of the ordinary, but I noticed something strange. There was algae. I got closer. The well was full of water. He seemed as surprised as I was. "It's been dry for years." He said, "This is definitely new. There was movement on the surface of the water, small gushes breaking the surface. Tension algae and water lilies overflowed, forming a green circle around the well. Had a strange smell like ale and ammonia lake water. This was not normal." We met with Lazy, and I explained to her what I had seen at the farm. Els left, silently not wanting to get involved in the conversation. Lacey just nodded, without reacting when I mentioned the cracked concrete, the leaning rows of barley, or the disordered shelves, seeing that there were clear signs of alteration in the area. I told her that I needed to check the structural integrity of the main buildings. And lastly, there was the well. This time, she reacted. Until that moment, she had nodded to everything, but suddenly she became defensive. She tried to explain to me that the well was clogged, and that they had had problems with rainwater before. There was nothing in the files about floods, but she insisted on arguing with her. Besides, she would not help us enter the farm. "You can drag it out as long as you want." "Miss Kettleman," I reminded her, "but we are not finished until I say so. We do not like the government hanging around here." "Sir," smiled Lace. This place has history. I told her I would come back the next day, and whoever was needed to do my job. Lacey just smiled. She wasn't going to make it easy on me. I took a moment to check on the other inspectors. It turned out I wasn't the only one who had noticed strange things. There were a lot of broken pipes, and the local high school was a mess. The elementary school in Juniper was closed, and no one could get in. Not even the inspectors. The whole building was sealed. In comparison, my overflowing well was nothing, yet there was one that didn't fit. That night, I went through the files over and over, looking for a plan for the next day. I would concentrate on checking the irrigation system and the pipes, and I would focus more on the interior. Lace would have to cooperate. I would even check the old warehouses from the Prohibition era. She would have to accept that the next morning, I got up early. I got to the Oak Valley Grain Farm around 7, but it was closed. Lace had put a sign on the door closed for renovations. Maybe she thought, if the place wasn't in operation, I wouldn't need inspection, but it doesn't work. So I tried to call her, but she didn't answer. I texted her either. She would open the facilities for inspection, or she would take legal action. Shortly after, she told me she would be there. An hour and a half later, Lace came out of the main office building. Apparently, she had been there the whole time. The weird thing is, there was no car in the parking lot. She had changed and was wearing a hoodie and ripped jeans. She looked exhausted. "Good morning," I asked her. I cursed myself for not wearing proper shoes again. Lace no answered. She just crossed her arms and lowered her head. Something was wrong. We entered the main office. Everything was in order. No damage or plumbing problems. I didn't understand. Why was she so reluctant to show me the place, Elle? Then I checked the files. There was the basement from the Prohibition era. "Okay," I sighed. "Time to go down." "Is it really necessary?" she asked Lace. "It's a mess. We don't use it for much. She's been avoiding this inspection for too long. Under the circumstances, I can't delay it any longer. It's just a basement." She shrugged. "Not much can go wrong. Everything can be broken." I told her the basement door was so small, I had to go in sideways. I didn't understand how in those days they moved contraband through there, but I wasn't in the mood to ask questions, just to check damage. We went down into a larger space with about a 2-meter drop to a warehouse. It was about 4 meters by 5 meters. There was an old steel staircase that led down with 2 open paths going deeper into the wall. There were lanterns hanging, so I grabbed one when I set foot on the ladder. I noticed Laida's expression changed. If she was upset before, now she looked regretful. This music they will complicate. Way clear, the supports seem be okay. I said going down, but there could be more damage inside. As I went down, I breathed in a strange smell, like salt water and ammonia. Suddenly she went up the stairs. It took me completely by. I hadn't even considered doing that. The stairs rattled away, and I stayed down there. It was so fast, I didn't know what to say. I just raised my arms in disbelief. "What the hell, I'm sorry." "Yes, of course you are sorry. Put the ladder back." "I can't. I'm going to call the police." There was no signal. We were too far underground. I slowly realized that she was going to leave me there. I only had a flimsy flashlight and a couple of hours of battery on my cell phone. Lace was still up holding the stairs. I felt my heart beating hard, drowning out any thoughts I had trouble breathing. I've never been phobic, but this was different. It was real danger. They came to me looking for shelter. She said they talked to her. "You know what you're talking about?" They said you would come, and I want to hear what they have to say. They can't keep me here. We just need time. "What is it?" "A noise." came from one of the side hallways. My heart jumped into my throat. I held my breath, trying to hear. Beyond the pounding in my ears, my fingertips felt cold. I heard a strange whistling sound, as if someone was trying to start an old engine. Lais tensed up, attentive to the sound. Something was there with me. "We came to your house," whispered Lazy. "Now they're coming to ours." I backed up to a corner and realized the floor was covered in a thin layer of water. I turned off the flashlight and listened, trying to calm myself down so I wouldn't start hyperventilating. Something was approaching, footsteps. "Hello?" whispered. "Lazy, do you want to talk to me?" The footsteps stopped. Then another hiss that ran down my spine like a shock. I felt like my nerves were being touched with a clear violin. Said Lace, "It's all yours." I heard her get up and take the ladder. The footsteps came closer. I tried to move, but I made too much noise. The footsteps stopped. For a moment I thought I had scared it. Then it started to run. I turned on the flashlight again and ran down the opposite hallway. Derb. Everything I found. Planks, barrels, empty, jars, anything that would serve me. I looked back and saw a pair of eyes emerging from the darkness. A wide mouth, like a shark. I ducked into a side room, a sort of meeting room. I jumped on a table, the derb, and walked away. Seconds later, the table broke into 2 shards of wood. They flew across the room, making me sneeze. But the thing stopped. It was just out of range of my flashlight. It hissed again and shook me. Another shiver, but in that sound I heard something else. It wasn't a word, but a bunch of jumbled thoughts, a chaos of information that I had to make sense of, and there was a meaning, clear, fear, anger, hunger. What do you want from me? I asked my flashlight, blinked, and the thing stirred. It was ready to strike like a coiled snake hiss. In response, hunger, sadness. I took refuge in a corner of the room, knocking over a shelf full of empty bottles from the Prohibition era. I saw the reflection of those dark eyes as they scanned back and forth, looking for an opening. Another whistle. A plea. A promise. A chilling coldness. It was beginning to sound like a language. An ancient primitive language capable of saying a lot with very little. I searched with my hands for the largest bottle I could find. Finally, I grabbed an old wine bottle. I waited for the creature to hiss again, and I readied the bottle to throw it as soon as I felt that tickle on my back. I knew I was about to hear the whistle. I stood up, lowered the flashlight, and threw the bottle with all my strength. A dull, meaty thud resounded. The whistle stopped, and I saw the eyes rise almost 2 feet into the air. The creature had been hunched over. Now it was taller than the tunnel. He shuddered and uttered a word that filled me with images of cold tunnels filled with water, the creaking of the fish bones in a hungry mouth, dying men in black robes, praising a drowned god, praying to see another sunrise. I didn't realize I had gone. Still, the flashlight pointed at the floor as dark eyes approached. I backed away to the wall, trying to circle the room. The creature followed me, mimicking my movements. I came to the hallway with my back turned, so I turned to run. It was right behind me, and it was fast. I kept going, listening to its whistling approach. Hunger, joy, hunger, heat. I ran through the warehouse until I came to a hallway that twisted and turned until it ended in a lower room. I stumbled forward, twisting my ankle and dropping the flashlight. In an instant, the light flickered and went off. I searched my pockets and pulled out my cell phone. My hands were so full I couldn't unlock it. On the third try, I succeeded and turned on the phone's flashlight. The creature was almost on me. It shrieked and backed away, blinded. I had too many limbs, too much of everything. Anger, desperation, with the phone on. I tried to stand. I couldn't move. My foot was too twisted. I could barely jump a little. But it wouldn't be enough for whatever was outside. Instead, I looked around the room I was in. Looked like an armory. There were boxes of broken wood and used shotgun shells on the floor on the wall. An old oil lamp hung rusty. "No, don't come in here," I said out loud. "I'm not going to die here." A hiss, a strange word, went through my mind. A man handing a poisonous snake to a golden woman. Hills filled with men crucified. As far as the eye could see, the certainty of a violent death. The echoing wails of the damned. I didn't understand my own fear. I was already damned. So there was no point in fighting it. For the creature in the dark time didn't matter. I realized I had been sitting listening to those hisses for at least 10 minutes. My cell phone. It was hot, and the water level had risen about 2 centimeters. Of course, the water had to be a water outlet somewhere. Everything was breaking. It was a miracle I hadn't noticed. Before there was an overturned table in the center of the room. There I had twisted my ankle. I kicked it with my good foot and discovered a crack in the floor where water was gushing out of the crack. Emerged some water lilies of a strange blue color. Like a withered sunflower, that crack could be an old well or the beginning of an underground tunnel. Whatever it was, I had to take a risk. I didn't know how far I went. I could drown, but I could also find a way out. I left my cell phone on at the entrance, using the light to keep the creature at bay. With a last shriek, it transmitted a last image to me. Webbed fingers underground, tearing a human body into pieces. I threw myself. I began to crawl centimeter by centimeter. The wet floor didn't let me advance well, and the water burned my eyes. I felt my nails about to break from where they dug in. In my fingers, my chest ached and cramped. I came to a fork. I turned left. I felt a current, a stream. I wiped at something sticky off my face. A slope, up cold. I couldn't feel my arms, getting hungry. I broke the surface. I was in a stone pit. I crawled out, panting. I looked back only to see something just under the water, in the overflowing pit. 2 black eyes. They sank back into the darkness, backing into the depths. I came to the nearest road and flagged down the first car that passed. They brought Lace Kettleman in for questioning, but that was all I knew. There was no trial or questions. I just talked to a serious man in a suit, and that was it. They asked me to sign a confidentiality agreement for at least 10 years. It just expired, and I've been waiting to tell my story. Anders Kettleman took back control of the Oak Valley grain farm as far as I know. Leigh never went to jail. Something must have happened because she was missing for the better part of a decade, maybe. She had something they wanted. I think what I found in Oak Valley was related to the 2013 crash. There were a lot of rumors from that area, and I'm sure at least some arose from what Leigh had let into her basement. There aren't many who have talked about that incident, but I know they're out there. Maybe they hope we've all forgotten or moved on. Maybe they hide behind contracts and scare tactics. But I want to remind them like I remind myself every day. Everything breaks. Music.